Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Mr Chairman, can I first of all acknowledge the member who's just resumed his seat, and I hope that at some point during the rest of the committee stage of the debate he's able to elaborate on that, because I think the voting ability for citizens and the proud record that New Zealand has in comparison to those countries where that right to vote was determined by referendum is very worthy of comparison. I know there may be some who think the downfall of our society started when women won the right to vote, but I'm not one of those who shares that view, and I know David Bennett doesn't agree with that either. He supports the right of women to vote.
If only women could vote in the Labour Party.
Mr Chairman, I want to acknowledge the work of the Select Committee up to this process, and particularly in relation to the supplementary order papers that the committee will be considering, but actually the work of the Select Committee generally. This is not an easy issue for us to have considered as a Select Committee, and I want to pay tribute to all the members of the Select Committee, those who sat on every single day of it and those who just joined us at some time. Some of the stories we heard were really hard to listen to. Some of the stories that told of how people from when they're very, very young feel about being excluded from their families and being excluded from their communities, always feeling different, and how frustrating, how demoralising, and actually the worst part was how suicidal that made people feel, particularly young people. We heard factual evidence of the much higher rate of suicide amongst young people whose sexual orientation was different than they had expected it to be and different than their families and their communities expected to be. They were gay and lesbian and weren't that out of their own choice with that, because that's how they were born. Mr Chairman, more than anything in this Parliament, we should strive to make sure that our laws and our leadership and our attitude ensures that people who do others no harm are made to feel part of our community, are made to feel as valued as they are valuable. And in my view, every gay and lesbian law-abiding citizen in our country deserves this support of our Parliament to ensure that they never feel second-rate, that they never feel less worthy than anyone else, and that our law backs them in their love, which is the proposal that we are progressing tonight. Mr Chairman, I also want to acknowledge the officials of our Select Committee. We didn't give them an easy time, frankly, and that again is directly in relation to some of the issues which we'll be debating tonight. We had some interesting tensions. The tension between religious freedom and protecting human rights was one that we found quite difficult to resolve, and I think we have got it absolutely right, and that's why I would be urging every member of the House to oppose the supplementary order papers which extend discrimination provisions to all marriage celebrants. I don't agree with that. I think when we say in this House, what should we tolerate as discrimination? What should we accept as being actions which clearly breach our human rights provision? You know, they've been in place for nearly, how long? A long time, 2 decades. They're old provisions. They're sacred provisions. When we say what actions should breach our human rights provision, I think we should do it with care, and we did that at the Select Committee. We said that religious freedoms should be exempt from those human rights provisions, and therefore that marriage celebrants who are associated with religious organisations should lawfully be backed to decline the obligation of solemnising a same-sex marriage. Our view was that it was already covered in the law, but we did a belt and braces approach to make sure that that religious freedom is maintained. We've specified it in our amendments to the legislation. Any further amendment, whether it's the SOP in the name of Sir William Seo or the SOP in the name of Dr Paul Hutchison, goes beyond what I think is fair and reasonable for this Parliament to justify. The SOP in the name of Sir William Seo actually extends it and narrows it at the same time in a way that I think will give a confused message from this parliament, and that's not one I want to give.
I'm going to call Sue Williams.